What is your most traumatic experience with a teacher? My 4th grade teacher had a reputation for making one boy in her class an unpopular scapegoat each year. Lucky me. In previous years I'd been just another kid in the playground. But within 2 months the other kids wouldn't play with me during recess. One day I refused to go outside for recess. She asked why, and I foolishly told her that the other kids didn't like me. When they came back in, she marched me to the front of the class and asked for a show of hands. Who didn't like me? 4th grade kids. Mostly. Did what 4th grade kids do. I broke down that night and told my mom what had happened and what had been going on all along. She marched into school the next day, got a meeting that included the principal, and tore the teacher a new booty hole. I was still stuck in that class, but the teacher moved on to a new victim. Funny thing how self-esteem influences academic performance. My school used to give us a Stanford Binet IQ test every year. My score dropped 10 points from 3rd to 4th grade, then rose 20 points in 5th grade when I had a nurturing teacher. If you are still alive, frick you, Mrs. Erickson. For an Erickson, she should really try to understand Erickson's theory of development. That would have reminded her that accomplishing things and receiving praise helps students grow. When I was in high school I got a lot of nosebleeds. Like a lot. So I got one in the middle of class and I asked the teacher for a tissue. She said she didn't have any, so I asked to go to the toilet to get one, then she said no. Soon I asked again when blood was dripping from my hands and she yelled at me for repeating myself, which is apparently bad. Soon a puddle of blood was on the table, then I got sent to isolation for disrupting the class. I was then suspended for acting inappropriate during class. She was then fired for putting my life at risk. I gotta say, when you get a nosebleed like that, you really see how much blood is inside of you. Frickin' frick. I had exactly the same. I used to get nosebleeds in high school and most teachers were just cool about it. My English teacher even started keeping a tissue box in his classroom. But my history teacher was just a big fat meanie about it. Like I'd raise my hand to be excused and he just ignored it until I just got up and left for the bathroom. And then the kicker, when I got back to class he'd make some sort of big fat meanie comment about people going out of class without asking permission. He was a really good and nice teacher outside of that, so it really confused me why he did that. But yeah, I ruined a couple of shirts with bloodstains because of that. Should have written an assignment with your blood then. Edit. Alright. Fine. Maybe he should have used something to dip into his blood. I was bullied really bad. Kids kept drawing awful ugly photos and leaving them on my desk with profanity towards my appearance. I had enough one day after dealing with a lot of abuse at home and the bullying at school, and when I saw another broke down crying and brought it to my teacher. She just grabbed it, looked and asked if I wanted it back. Did nothing to help. Wouldn't listen to me about the constant bullying and did absolutely nothing. I was in 7th grade and still remember it to this day. Edit. Thanks for Silver Friend. Also thank to all who wished me well. Unfortunately no, I won't be doing anything towards the teacher. It was 12 years ago. I wish she learned better, but it was a small town school and as sad as it is, that's just the way it was. I hope I can be a better teacher when I'm finished school. Mine is more of a light-hearted traumatic. In 4th grade I collected Yu-Gi-Oh cards and I had gotten the, at the time, new 3 Egyptian god cards. Well, I was caught playing with them during class and my teacher took them from me and threw them out. I was devastated after all the packs opened and cards traded to acquire them. I never forgave her. Did they ever end up being worth anything before all the reprint boxes? I would have loved to see her face if she found out they were worth some coin. Edit. The teacher was an older southern lady in her 60s, so she was definitely in that mindset that she had 100% say in whatever she did with our personal belongings. Pretty sure if corporal punishment was still allowed I would have gotten the paddle on several occasions. I wasn't the only one who lost cards that day. Buddy who sat next to me had his Black Magician of Black Chaos and Blue Eyes Ultimate taken from him. Teacher told me I was a liar to the whole class as she didn't believe my grandmother was a World War II evacuee. She refused to believe me as she assumed my mum was younger than she looked at the time, and therefore my grandmother was younger as well. She thought my mum was in her late 20s when in reality she was in her early 40s at the time. Didn't traumatize me personally, but I had a first-year lecturer in classics who went out of his way to terrorize the class. His first words to us were, "I suspect as many as half of you cannot read." He then administered a test, which 2/3 of the class failed. He was not shy about voicing his rather gleeful displeasure. I did well enough to avoid his wrath, and, annoyingly, get singled out for praise. He would routinely throw questions at students who weren't paying rigorous attention, in a 3-hour lecture on Friday morning, and then berate them for not knowing the answers. His comments on papers were beyond trenchant. "Are you illiterate? Do you imagine this makes sense? This is childish," etc. The unfortunate part is that he was a superb classicist. A close second was a novelist turned writing professor who hurled a girl's manuscript out of his office door, nearly hitting me in the hall, as he shouted, "This is not writing." She came out to pick up her magnus opus moments later, weeping. Great writer, self-confessed meanie teacher. My favorite teacher in middle school was arrested for child pornography. He wasn't my favorite after that. He also wasn't my teacher after that. Why is this so common? Every person I have met had told me that at some point in their school history, some teacher was fired for either CP or going after female students. Even in my own school. Though it does remind me of the time where we had a supply teacher in our class that would kind of just oogle directly at any girl in front of him. When he wasn't doing that, he would then just deadpan stare at the person next to me until another girl walked past him. That was the only time I saw that teacher. During quiet reading time, teacher brought me to front of the class because I was reading a book for girls, and he asked me, "Why are you reading a G.I. Rules book? Are you a girl?" Then made me choose a book for boys to read. I was maybe 10 or 11. The book was Matilda, by the way. If you are enjoying this video, please like it. It helps my channel grow. Got accused of plagiarism over a paper I wrote, and didn't plagiarize. That I was really excited about because of how well I thought I did on it. Enthusiasm fully destroyed. I had a similar experience where my lit professor brought me in to tell me my paper was flagged by the software for being plagiarized from over 180 other student papers from around the country. Not websites, not public articles, student papers from other schools. Longest chain of plagiarized words was 6. I laughed because I thought she was pointing out how ridiculously sensitive the software was. She was offended that I laughed at her. I asked her if she really believed that I tracked down almost 200 students to steal 3-word phrases from them and stitch them together into a paper, which would take 50x the effort that it actually took to write it. Not in those exact words. I really thought I wrote a great paper. Got an A, but I think it was because she felt dumb. This sounds like a "this sounded better in my head" scenario. I said that the dot over the I or J is called a tittle. She said it's not a tittle, it's a dot. And with that, she accused me of being impertinent. I read titty. Technically it was the vice principal, but the day my brother died, apparently he thought it would be a good idea to walk in on story time. The teacher was reading to the class, sit me on his lap and tell me in front of everyone that my brother committed suicide. Dude, what a freak. I'm so sorry this happened to you. What the frick, this sounds like a bad Family Guy skit or something. We were discussing Jean Vanier and Elluck. For context, Jean Vanier decided to invite 2 intellectually disabled men to live with him and started setting up homes for them so they wouldn't be in asylums. The teacher looked right at me, "I'm disabled," and said, "Oh yeah, Vanier created those homes so you people wouldn't be bothering people because the handicapped don't function in society." My friend and I left just to talk it out. He got fired a few years later because he did not have his license up to date. Cherry on top, his wife was the vice principal. I got into a shouting match with my band director before a marching band competition in another state. He had anger issues and the fight was over him calling me out in front of everyone for messing up my saxophone solo the week before. There was no one else around to see or hear the shouting. He never said so much as a word to me for the remainder of my time in high school, and I was perfectly fine with it. One time I was on my period and I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom multiple times. She refused to let me go. Eventually I stained my uniform and the chair. I was so embarrassed that I started crying. When my mother found out, she made the school fire that big fat meanie. A teacher at my middle school announced that he would be noting the dates when girls left the classroom for period emergencies. so he could call us out on our bull poop or whatever, because long or irregular cycles totally aren't a thing faced with rolling eyes. Hee hee ha ha ha. Hi friends, if you enjoyed this video please like it and subscribe or don't, I'm not your boss.